Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at a series of developments that have taken place today with regards to the PTI leader Fawad Ch's arrest that began early morning following an FIR that was registered against him in Islamabad Khawar police station by an ECP official for inciting violence against a constitutional institution, among other charges also that were put in place, including sedition. And we also know, of course, that in the aftermath of this, there was a series of events that took place in terms of bringing the PTI leader from Lahore to Islamabad, whereby the Lahore Kent Court allowed the police to be able to do that in terms of a transit remand and take the PTI leader to Islamabad. Meanwhile, of course, the Lahore High Court was moved by the PTI and a petition was lodged with regards to this particular arrest, deeming it unconstitutional and illegal, whereby the Lahore High Court judge asked for the PTI leader to be presented, and this happened repeatedly 4 times, but at some point during the day, Fawad Ch was apparently nowhere to be found, and there was a lot of confusion with regards to his presence, and later on it was declared that he was on his way to be presented before an Islamabad court. And then, of course, after this particular series of events took place, the Lahore petition was dismissed by the Lahore High Court judge, and Fawad Ch was presented in the Islamabad District and Sessions Court, whereby the police investigating, of course, this particular incident and the FIR that was lodged against him asked for an 8-day physical remand. The verdict has been reserved. We don't know yet what the decision is going to be, but in the meantime, of course, there's been a lot of ruckus, especially by the PTI leaders, in terms of blaming the government, the authorities and the ECP for lodging an unconstitutional FIR and moving forward with an arrest that was not done in a manner befitting a former minister, a lawyer and a senior politician. There is, of course, also a lot of concern with regards to how this particular arrest is being given a political tint, and because of that, we also saw earlier in the day that the Information Minister, Maryam Aurangzeb, also appeared and gave a press conference distinguishing the fact that this is not a political arrest, and in fact what happened in the aftermath of the FIR that was lodged by an ECP official, and it was done by the ECP official, and in the aftermath of which a series of events took place, which then went to the courts, and it's of course now up to the courts to decide on the matter. The Lahore High Court at the same time had also questioned the way the PTI lawmakers were questioning the legality of the decision in terms as to what really was illegal about this, and said that this was not in fact unconstitutional. There is, of course, the decision regarding the particular remand and the issue of the various charges that have been lodged against him still remains. At the same time, we saw that the PTI chairman has also addressed the audience via video link and spoken about how this particular arrest has further exposed the ECP, one that, of course, the PTI chairman and the other PTI leaders have also been blaming and accusing of biasness and not being objective and without credibility, especially in the aftermath of the appointment of the Punjab caretaker CM, after which the PTI also announced nationwide protests and have called upon the people to come out and fight for what they call is justice and what needs to happen in the country. Of course, these series of events are taking place at a time where Pakistan is still struggling, especially at the economic front, and the way that the conditions of the country are being affected, while at the same time we know that both the provinces of KP and Punjab are currently without government, and because of that, of course, there are going to be elections held in both the provinces. At the same time, the centre is also devoid of 40% of its seats, also something which is being asked as a basis for the government to hold general elections. In the aftermath, it is important to also know that the particular arrest of the PTI leader Fawad Ch, a series of tweets have also been circulated in which a number of journalists have called for this particular action to be stopped and for his release, and as also some of them have been demanding the call for general elections. So we're going to take a look at all of this, particularly, of course, in the context of what is going on between the PTI and the current political setup, but also in terms of how it impacts the current situation of the country and what needs to be done with regards to not just this particular incident, but in terms of where the the political lines need to be drawn, especially in terms of criticism against institutions or any other bodies. And then also, of course, the way that we would like to see the remaining months to pass, and the way the elections in the provinces and the center are going to take place, and what needs to be done with regards to that. So that is going to be the focus of our show today. And for this, of course, we have been joined in the studios by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi, and online we've been joined by Mr. Usama Ghumman, who's a legal expert, and also Mr. Adil Chattha, who's also a legal expert, and we'll be talking to, of course, both of them regarding the particular legalities that are, of course, involved in this entire equation. So let me start with you, Mr. Adil, considering, of course, that when we take a look at the situation which has currently taken place, there are a number of questions that have been raised. But let's begin from where we see this initiation of events. The FIR was lodged at the Islamabad police station, something that has been remarked by many people as not being legal, considering that the issue, the speech that is being referred to as being part of inciting violence against a constitutional institution had taken place in Lahore. And so beginning the fact that this actually happened is something that lacks legal ground, whether or not that is true. And then also at the same time, when we take a look at the petition that was filed against the particular arrest in the Lahore High Court, how exactly can that happen while, of course, the court is demanding the presence of the PTI leader and has been asked repeatedly to summon him, but the Lahore Kent court had allowed this particular transit remand to occur. So could you explain these developments to us?
Thank you very much. So first of all, starting with the registration of FIR in the police station Khawar in Islamabad. So obviously legal questions can be raised regarding if the FIR should have been registered in Lahore or in Islamabad, as the comments which have been cited by the Election Commission of Pakistan's registrar in the FIR were stated in Lahore. But this is a question which is for the trial court to determine, or when the FIR is challenged before the superior courts and Mr. Fawad Ch or his allies contact the courts for quashment of the FIR. This is a question which will obviously be dealt at that stage. But as far as this stage is concerned, as long as there is an FIR, as long as you see the complainants were based in Islamabad, they approached the police registered an FIR, then the police came to Lahore, they contacted the local police station in Lahore, and with the help of the local police station here, all the legalities met. They arrested the said person, and then in accordance with the law, they took the person for the physical remand, and thereafter his transitory remand was given by the Kent magistrate, and thereafter he was taken from Lahore to Islamabad. So in the meanwhile, while all of this was in process, and while he was being presented before the Kent court, and while he was taken from Lahore to Islamabad, in the meanwhile his relatives and the PTI approached Lahore High Court. So when in such an instance habeas corpus petition is filed against illegal custody before Lahore High Court, Lahore High Court didn't have the benefits of looking at the FIR, the registrar of the Lahore High Court. So obviously the matter was placed before a judge, and a judge heard the matter in its entirety as much as was possible in one day. And after looking at the FIR and after looking at the proceedings, the way they were taken, for example, the involvement of the local police station in Lahore, and then the remand by the Kent magistrate taking the person to the Islamabad after getting transitory remand as per the law. So thereafter the Lahore High Court dismissed the petition, and we are all awaiting for the final order in the petition.
Right. Mr. Usama, considering that now, of course, the verdict has been reserved, and there's a lot, of course, that depends on what is going to be decided by the court. But in terms of the charges that have been leveled against the PTI leader, especially those of sedition, of course, these are serious charges. And we also have seen that the speech that is being referred to has also been played in terms of that being evidence of the leader inciting violence against a constitutional institution. What, in your opinion, is that really something that is happening, or the charges that are being leveled against him something that makes sense in light of these speeches? And also, how exactly do you think this is going to now play out in the courts, depending on how this has taken place and the number of stakeholders that are involved?
Uh, Thank you, Sana. I'm really glad that you have asked this question. Uh, so what we have been seeing on TV, and this entire drama, some of it could have been perhaps avoided if we had the authorities, charging authorities, had focused on the letter of the law. So the charges, especially the more serious charge, is of 124A, which is essentially is sedition. So there several high courts and constitutionals have often said, and lots of bar councils and civil society have raised serious concerns about charging with sedition, and this was happening during the previous government. In fact, we saw that during the previous government, the students in the heart of Lahore, Pakhtun students, the students who were marching, in fact, one time even lady health workers were charged with sedition, and teachers. So it's very unfortunate that an elected politician was charged with sedition, and that is more unfortunate because the Pakistan Penal Code provides several remedies for the sort of statements, for the threats. So let me be very clear that there is no doubt that what Fawad Ch said, that was threatening the Chief Election Commissioner and his family. So that is a crime under the law, and there is a specific section in the Pakistan Penal Code where all the crimes are enumerated, and that section is 189. So I have the FIR in front of me, and the most obvious section that you would charge, that he should have been charged with, is absent. 189 is absent, and what we have is 153, 506, and these are serious charges. So what it does, Sana, it does that it has politicized the entire issue, as the minister rightly said, the honorable minister earlier, that the other party is trying to politicize. So, but there's a problem that they have an iota, a straw to attach to, and to politicize the issue. So I think this is very unfortunate that he should not have been charged. But what he said is definitely prima facie appears to be a crime, and he should have been charged with the proper sort of charging provisions. And generally, 124 is an outdated colonial sort of provision. It has no use or purpose in modern society. So it should be done away with. Islamabad High Court and in fact Lahore High Court has also hinted in several judgments that in an appropriate case they would be willing to perhaps strike it down. And after the 1973 constitution, perhaps this provision has no place in a democratic society like Pakistan.
Right, absolutely. Farrukh, a number of people, of course, have been demanding the release of the PTI leader. But what is, of course, also important is what is being discussed regarding the impact this has, or what it says about the overall condition that the country is in, or what sort of behaviors we have seen repeatedly over the years and many times in the past as well that have taken place politically. And similarly, we also saw that there were a number of questions raised regarding the manner in which Fawad Ch was arrested. And then, of course, the way that, as we were discussing with Mr. Usama, the way that the charges have been leveled against him, despite the fact that perhaps the evidence doesn't amount to that. Considering all of this, of course, what do you think in terms of the kind of responsibility that needs to exist by the political decision makers as to where and when to draw the lines, especially also in terms of criticism, and then also in terms of such measures that are taken against such people. How can we ensure that that actually happens, and who's responsible for that?
Obviously, Sana, this is a good question, and I'm going to actually try to answer this complicated question with equal complications, right? So I'll request a little bit of patience. First of all, among the people who were demanding a release, were at the top of the list was, of course, the party's head, Imran Khan Sahab. When he came on television, somewhere in the discussion, he forgot that he had to actually focus on Fawad Ch, and somehow he brought the discussion back to the old speech that he has been giving for past 7-8 months now. But having said that, they full marks for cognitive dissonance, because Imran Khan Sahab was sitting on television on 50 channels, unedited, live on television, and saying that there is a conspiracy to silence him. And I kept on looking for the conspiracy because I could not find that. Not only that, immediately after that, because he was delivering at 6-ish, so 7 o'clock is the time when you start seeing discussions on television. And most of the programs that I saw were dominated by A, people who are sympathetic to Imran Khan Sahab's cause, or B, people who in principle were against the arrest, right? So I don't understand if there's a conspiracy to silence him, where exactly does it lie? But having said that, regarding Fawad Ch, let me actually put it out there that I have known Fawad Ch as a friend for past 15-16 years. Of course, to the extent of working class journalist can actually befriend a rich politician who later on became his boss as well. So I've known him as a friend, and that is not all. There's a lot of complication. If you remember during PTI's time, when once again we were being asked to prove our purity. For 1.5 years, I kept on working here without a contract, right? So that was a very abusive kind of environment and very difficult kind of situation, because the market was already out of sync. At that time, Fawad Ch was not the minister of the in charge of the ministry that we worked for. Then he came back and I got the contract. So I'm grateful for that bit at least, and I wanted to put it out there. Regarding sedition, I agree with my friends here that I don't believe in anything of that sort at all, because I've been, for 10 years, I've been debating that even Article 6 that deals with the highest level of treason should be replaced with something else. That is a truth and, truth commission, and through that everything should be handled. Having said that, what Fawad Ch said, there is something that worries me. It is not about the attempts to instigate some kind of mutiny in the country, because today even Imran Khan Sahab was trying to do exactly that. No, Imran Khan Sahab has started something else since the day he lost power, and that is dragging people's relations, their families into these discussions as well. So my first concern, of course, is somebody who is actually attacking institutions. It is in bad taste, because in the end, you have to go to the very same institutions to seek justice or some kind of resolution. But the second thing, you start including their families as well. That is worrying to me, right? Fawad Ch also said something of the similar sort. He said that they and their families will not be forgiven, and they should be responsible for the consequences. This actually worries me, and of course then there was an FIR which was filed. I hope it would have remained or focused on that bit. But there are two very interesting things about Fawad Ch. Professional hazard is that when you are a spokesman, you have to say whatever is on the leader's mind. But we remember that when Justice Faiz Isa's reference was being filed in public, Fawad Ch was actually defending their reference, but in private we learned that he was opposing the notion. So that is also a problem here, that somehow the messenger gets targeted rather than the source of it all. And Imran Khan Sahab has been repeatedly doing exactly that. And finally, Sana, you have convinced me. I kept on thinking that Imran Khan Sahab was getting bad advice. But I think at the heart of this instability, the core, the source is Imran Khan Sahab himself. Because whenever he thinks that there is any kind of heat that he has to face, he totally, goes jittery. And I mean, today's speech is not even worth commenting on because it was really saddening, the kind of message he was trying to give, and it won't work.
Absolutely, and I'm glad that you think that way. Mr. Usama, considering that when we take a look at this particular situation, especially the point that Farrukh raised regarding the issue of spokesman saying whatever is the party policy, or that being in contradiction with his own personal opinion, how exactly does accountability is maintained then, or is defined then, when there is a spokesman who's saying something on behalf of the party's policy? How much of an accountability can exist on the person as to how it is happening right now?
Yeah, so that is a very pertinent question, and also what Farrukh Sahab said. So I would just like to develop this idea, and I think he's perfectly right that what Fawad Ch had said is in fact, and for the speech for which he was eventually charged and arrested, is in fact at a lesser level, at a lesser level of criminality than what the leader himself, the great leader himself, have said repeatedly. So for a lawyer, for me, what is more important is that one of the fundamental features of law is consistency. And rule of law, that means that the law should be applicable to all, regardless of the stature of the person. So this also, to me appears to be very problematic, that a spokesperson or a lesser of a leader who he has been charged and arrested, but another person who has said lots of worse thing than what Fawad Chaudhry said. There has not been any FIR. In fact, Election Commission of Pakistan have been summoning him for several months, and he has not appeared before the Election Commission of Pakistan. So for me as a lawyer, it is very disturbing that the rule of law is being undermined. If the law enforcers they decide that the law should be enforced. Not to say that the Fawad Chaudhry is not a very powerful man, but compared to his leader, he's less of a powerful man. So if the consideration of law enforcement of agencies is that how big a leader or how many supporters he has, then we are in deep trouble. Because what we have seen in recent past, that there are religious political parties, they can bring hundreds of thousands of people on streets, and what if they start advocating, or try to in fact sow anarchy in society? So what are we going to do? That okay, since they have lots of followers, and so we are not going to prosecute them. So that is really worrying. And so I think Farrukh Saab has hit the nail on head by saying that the cause of problem, perhaps, or from a legal point of view, the leader have himself said worse things. So for consistency's sake, he should also be prosecuted, or perhaps Fawad Chaudhry, if the government does not have guts to prosecute the leader himself, then they perhaps should not prosecute Fawad Chaudhry as well.
Right. Mr. Adil, considering that when we take a look at this particular issue, what the defense that has been given both now and in the past has been that if this is the case, that criticism is not allowed at all, then perhaps everyone needs to be arrested, or everyone then is also guilty as to what the FIR says, or what sort of charges are being leveled. And this is also the sort of defense that has been given by other leaders from the PTI, even the chairman himself as well. There have been other excuses also given with regards to the location or the context in which something is being said, such as part of a jalsa, maybe it's all right, it's a part of political rhetoric, and otherwise it's taken in a different angle. What exactly is the legal opinion on this matter? Where do we draw a line between criticism and then contempt, especially when it comes to any constitutional institution?
Thank you, Sana. So, we have to distinguish between these two different ideas. One is the freedom of speech that every person has in the country, and obviously we from time to time see the restrictions that come on the freedom of speech, either legally or illegally through various means. And the second is using the sort of sentences against the families of the members of constitutional institutes. And we've seen that the constitutional institutes, either in this case or in the previous case when the similar sentences were used regarding the judges of the Supreme Court, they came back, they strike back. So that is one particular aspect of it. And the second aspect of it is connected what Mr. Usama was saying before me, is that the equal protection of law or the rule of law is absent in the country, and we can see it in two different manners. One is that the powerful people, for example, the leader of a political party, there is no action taken against them, but the messenger, the person who is messenger, as Farrukh Sahab pointed out, the action is taken against that person, and the leader is saved because they have more street power. We saw this in the previous government as well. While they were taking actions against all the political leaders through NAB or FIA, one particular leader of PDM who is based in KPK and is a leader of a religious party, no action was taken against him because his party claimed that we would block all Peshawar. So there is that aspect on one end, and on the other end, the equal protection of law and the rule of law. The other aspect is that when the state strikes, it strikes disproportionately, and it strikes with the provisions which are not involved, the provisions which are not attracted to the crime, and which we can also see in this case that the statements, the threatening statements, could have been prosecuted under various provisions of law, but not under the provisions under which they are taken. The action is taken against Mr. Fawad Ch.
All right. Considering, Farrukh, that the credibility of the institution in question, the ACP, has been something that the PTI has raised a number of times, and even now, of course, with regards to the appointment of the caretaker CM. But there's also, of course, questions being raised as to whether or not every action or statement warrants a response. And I understand the bit about the families, but in terms of the institution responding to any such statements or accusations, do you think that this, in fact, in any way helps their case, especially considering the way that the sentiments are, or the way that the political situation in Punjab and KP exists, and how the elections themselves are under a lot of scrutiny?
Right, Sana, I think this bit about families is important to understand,
Sure.
right? It is not, I don't actually talk about it lightly because, you have to understand what has been going on. Imran Khan Sahib actually said when he was coming out of power that if you support the new government or the people who were actually removing him, your families, your children, nobody will marry your children, right? They will be outcast. Now, I tell you something very interesting, Sana. I might be devil incarnate, I might be devil in flesh, but what do my children have to do with every bad thing that I do, right? So you cannot actually punish them. Then we also saw that there were attacks. The people were, hounded as well. So it is very important to understand why this was such a big cause of concern, why this FIR was lodged. Now, regarding Fawad Chaudhry, I think that he is a very smart guy, right? And believe me, I don't give this compliment to every person. He is a very smart guy. I think he will land on his feet. And eventually, when you talk about it, this is actually going to increase his stature, not diminish it, right? The method by which he was arrested and all that, I don't want to go into the detail of this, that most people who are arrested in, under these charges are arrested in the same way. And regarding Lahore High Court, their jurisdiction being invoked after a local court had already given him, the custodial remand so that he can be actually moved to Islamabad, that is something very different. But PTI has to start taking stock of what damage they are doing. Immediately after I heard that Fawad Ch has been taken into custody, naturally, because I know the man, I called various people just to understand whether he's safe or not, because there was also talk of this physical remand thing, right? So somebody who is in the know said something very interesting. He said that he is actually being saved from the or put out of the harm's way. And I tried to litigate this point because you know what happened immediately after this arrest. Shirin Mazari Sahib actually went on air and she made this video and she asked President of Pakistan, why are you sitting there, right? At this moment, PTI seems to be in a state of mind where it is hurting its own people. It is hurting people who are actually in institutions and doing their constitutionally mandated work. And this is exactly what we have seen the way they have brought down two governments. Imran Khan Saab's speech today was a clear, dog whistle calling for some kind of mutiny or some kind of reaction. But as I pointed out earlier as well, that will not happen. So even today, we did not see that kind of agitation on street. We did not see the romantic idea or notion of people actually choking everything in the world or in the country. That did not happen, right? So at this moment, PTI will have to understand that all this leverage that it had accrued or acquired over past many years since it was in power, it systematically dismantled it and gave it away. And now it only relies on agitation. And do you know why yesterday there was so much hoopla around Imran Khan Saab's house in Zaman Park? And that is also accountability of my own profession, Sana. One journalist who is closer to PDM actually tweeted that something about shackling people, shackling the person who is responsible for all the propaganda. There's another gentleman called Imran Riaz. He is a journalist, but he is also very associated or aligned with PTI. So he mistook it as possibility of an attack on Imran Khan or him being arrested. So all these people were gathered to prevent Imran Khan Saab's arrest. And then because it was about somebody else, he was taken away.
Yeah.
And journalists actually doing such things and trying to instigate violence or some kind of protest, is it a good look? Just tell me that. In the political culture, I think that there is going to be some harm, there is going to be some benefit. But at this moment, I am just told, and I'm happy to actually share it with you, that one thing is for sure, that Fawad Ch will not be harmed, physically harmed.
All right, and of course, we're glad that that is not taking place. Mr. Usama, when we talk about the consequences of actions, and especially as Farrukh was pointing out how a statement resulted in a series of events, especially also now that we see that a statement in question by the PTI leader is something that is being formed as the basis of inciting violence. Even if there is a certain incident, for example, hypothetically taking place, how exactly is that consequence traced back to a person or an entity who's so-called incited violence? What does the law say on the fact that when we have to trace back any particular incident, because there are a huge number of variables, of course, involved, what sort of a decision making takes place in terms of the factors that are taken into account?
So, Sana, so there are two, in fact, there are several processes in let's say, after a crime is committed. But for our purposes, in fact, three are very important. A is the initial registration of an FIR. FIR is first information report. The second part is the investigation, and the third is the trial itself, in which results either in a conviction or an acquittal. So what ordinarily happens, and theoretically what was supposed to, FIR was just supposed to be a harmless piece of information, as the name suggests, that first information report. But it's unfortunate that it is not as harmless this as the name might sound, first information report. So what happens is in our and in the way in civilized societies where there's a respect for rights. So first is an information, and then the investigative agency, which is ordinarily a law enforcement agency. It investigates those allegations of first information that they have received, and then they submit that information uh, to an impartial tribunal or court established by law to they go there with their investigation, with the results of the investigation. In Pakistan, the most brutal process is, in fact, the first process. So once there's an FIR, and it might be a completely fabricated FIR. If the charging provision is really severe one, then ordinarily, then you are left at the mercy of law enforcement agencies, and we all know what they are capable of doing. And then another sad part is that the courts ordinarily are reluctant to grant you bails. They only grant bails in highly exceptional cases to powerful people, or there's loss of media publicity, so on and so forth. So ordinarily they don't grant bail. So even if someone is held in a really completely fabricated FIR, if the charges are really serious, so you can be in jail for a long time in custody. So your question was that how are we to determine in a well-functioning criminal system? That is the determination that first the investigation agencies make, and then ultimately it is the court that decides. So in our criminal system, the conviction rate is very low, very low. Even in really good cases where there's solid evidence, ultimately there are very few convictions. So the actual punishment that is meted to a person who is even accused is during the investigative stage. That is when the investigative agency gets this power to arrest, and then they can detain you for a long time. So
Okay.
so it so it is the job of the investigator to connect those dots, and that cannot be determined at an initial stage, at the information stage. So that is a sort of a dysfunction of our system, that a thing that should be done in the investigative stage is not done.
All right. Thank you for that. Mr. Adil, the wife of the PTI leader, of course, has requested the Chief Justice to take a suo motu notice in the matter, and we keep, of course, hearing this particular demand on a number of occasions. Does this particular case warrant any suo motu notice, and do you think that that is a possibility? Mr.
So,
Adil, can you hear me?
With regards
Yes,
to the
go
suo
ahead.
motu notice, I think it depends on the Supreme Court. But I think, yeah, can you
Go
hear
ahead,
me?
sir. Go ahead, sir. Go ahead. We can hear you.
So it depends on the Supreme Court, but looking at this Supreme Court and the Supreme Court, the way it is working currently, I think there won't be any suo motu notice, and even otherwise, when the suo motu notice is taken and the Supreme Court is involved in the matter right from the start, I think the investigation is hampered, and the investigation is unable to work in the way it has to in the ordinary course of law. And it also again then connects back to the question of equal protection of law, where suo motu notice is taken on in the cases of other individuals who were arrested in sedition charges, for example, Mia Javed Latif, or for example, the cases against Captain Safdar, were suo motu notices taken in those cases. I think it is highly improbable that Supreme Court is going to take a suo motu notice under Article 184(3) in this case.
All right. Farrukh, the political aspect, of course, also stands in terms of how this is going to impact the way that the elections, particularly in Punjab, are going to be affected, and of course, otherwise as well. And we also know that Maryam Nawaz's return is expected by the end of this week as well. And she and Mr. Rana Sanaullah have been tasked with running the election campaigns and heading the campaigns and meetings prior to these elections. And so that, of course, is something something that is also going to affect the way that we're going to see the elections in the province evolve. But particularly in terms of how this particular incident plays out, and has similar incidents have played out in the past, it seems that there is a lot of negative feedback that is given to the current political setup in question whenever such an incident takes place, whether it was, of course, PTI's regime or any other political party. So how do you think this is now going to play out and impact the way elections are going to run in Punjab?
All right, Sana, first of all, something that was said earlier regarding FIR and how it is supposed to be, something which is not in itself really dangerous. But I believe that the operative part is a report. The moment you actually get a report and it is registered, at that time, the wheels of justice start their motion, right? They are in motion, and then there has to be a consequence. Regarding, how the whole thing was framed, that still needs to be seen whether it is going to blow up or it is going to continue the way it is. My hunch is that sedition charge is eventually going to be dropped. But that doesn't mean that he's not going to be interned, or he's not going to stay behind in the official custody, right? Having said that, how does this actually translate? If PTI or its supporters were right, and PTI is very powerful or influential even now, then the entire country would have been shut down. People would have been standing on the streets protesting. That did not happen. Despite the fact that on 50 channels, Sana, one man, that is the former Prime Minister, speaks for half an hour, and then he berates everybody who is there, institutions included. Then he calls for, jihad, or then revolution as well, or some kind of mutiny. After that, if you go to Twitter, Facebook, anywhere else, you will see, trend that have started, and PTI trends, and those trends are attacking every institution of the country. So after that much of an effort, if there were to be any consequences, any impact, that would have already set in. So clearly something has changed. Since last time PTI, lost Imran Khan's office, and then there were by-elections, right? At that time, there was a lot of support. Imran Khan Saab's, when you had by-elections in Punjab Assembly seats, PTI walked away with 10 out of 20. When it came to the national seats, Imran Khan Saab himself stood on 7, and he carried, 6 seats, and he was quite successful there as well. But since then, what are the things that have happened? On one side, Imran Khan Saab's entire narrative has been falling apart. First, it was a foreign conspiracy.
Right.
Then it was the former army chief. That gentleman has retired also. Then, of course, blame everybody who comes in your way, and he has been accusing everybody, right? With all that said, now Imran Khan Saab's impact seems to be further diminishing, and I don't take pride in the fact that the audio leaks might also have actually impacted his popularity. After that, now shift to PMLN. I think that Maryam Nawaz is coming, Rana Sana has also been tasked to actually take care of the election messaging. So it will depend on how PMLN manages its own stables. If they are effective, then they will very easily gain ground. Otherwise, of course, they can sabotage themselves. PTI keeps on sabotaging itself.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Muhammad Adil Chattha and Mr. Usama Khawar Ghumman, and of course Farrukh, for joining us as part of the discussion. And we hope that better sense prevails, and whatever we see is in fact good for the country. That's all that we have from the debate. We'll keep updating you as more news comes in. Keep watching PTV World.